everyone. In this session, we're going to talk about the grammar points of Unit 8 and 9. So, let's start with Unit 8. The Unit 8's grammar points are past continuous tense and past perfect tense. So, let's start with past continuous tense. Past continuous tense talks about the events in a time before now, which began in the past and still going on in the past. So in a way, we're talking about the events that is unfinished or incomplete actions. So we use the past continuous events for events happening at a particular time in the past. So we usually use this past continuous tense to talk about actions and actions that is happening around a particular time in the past. So it can emphasize that action or the state continued for a period of time. So let's look at this example here. For example, where was Jana last night? I think she was visiting her grandmother. So we're saying that this visiting grandmother continued for a long time. So another usage is for background events. When we're talking about an action, two actions actually, and one action is more important than the other, then we can use past simple with this more important event and the background event for past continuous. Like, I saw my friend when I was driving back to home. So I'm saying that I was driving is less important than seeing my friend. Seeing my friend is the most important event in this one. And we use past continuous for ongoing or repeated events. So when we're saying that, when we talk about repeated actions in the past or something that is going on, continuing for a long time, then we can use this past continuous. Let's look at the example. Like, the neighbors were making so much noise night after night. We had to complain eventually. So it says that night after night. This tells us that this is an repeated and ongoing event. So we're saying that the neighbors were making. All right. So let's visualize what we have covered so far. When we're we have this timeline here. So when we're talking about the past, we're talking about when we're talking about past continuous, we're talking about ongoing situations. So if you look at the first timeline, we will see that I was eating grapes. It means that it is going on for a certain time. And when we're talking about the second use of it, like when we're talking about an interrupted ongoing event, let's look at the example. I was eating grapes when she arrived. So I was continuing while eating grapes, but she arrived and interrupted my eating the grapes. And when we're talking about parallel actions, so it tells us that two actions are happening at the same time, then we can use past continuous. For example, I was writing while she was dictating. So when we're talking about two events happening at the same time, then we can use past continuous. Okay, so what is the form of past continuous? So this continuous tells us that we have to use be verb ing, but be in the past is was were, so we have to use this was were with ing. For example, I was watching TV, or she was watching TV, or they were working hard. So we have to use was were with verb ing. Okay. This was something that you had already know, past continuous tense. We already covered this, but this is something new that you haven't seen. Past perfect simple is to talk about actions that were completed before some point in the past. A bit strange, isn't it? So, past perfect tense is at first can be difficult to understand, but it is actually very easy. So we use it for ordering events. So we can use this past perfect simple to emphasize that one action happened before another in the past. So in a way, it is past of the past. So we put the events in order and say that something happened first, then this thing happened after. For example, They lost many of the games because they had not practiced enough. So it tells us that practicing is beforehand, but they didn't do it enough. So that's why they lost it. Or you had studied Italian before you moved to Rome. So you knew the Italian language before you went to Rome. Let's visualize it. So the blue cross talks about the past perfect event, and the black cross talks about the past simple event. So the film has started before we arrived. So it tells us that we arrived at the cinema late and the film had already started. So we're talking about an event that happened before, the past of the past. Another usage is time up to then. So the past perfect refers to time up to a point in the past, just as the present perfect refers to something that happened in the time up to the moment of speaking. A lot of words. Let's look at an example. So, for example, I had been to 5 countries in Europe by 2001. So, it tells us that until 2001, I had been into 5 European countries. And it finished in there. But when we talk about the present perfect, it says that I had been to 5 countries in Europe. It tells us that the moment of speaking, I have been to 5 countries, maybe I will go on, I will travel again, maybe I won't. But up till the moment of speaking, I have been to those 5 countries. Okay, the form of the past perfect. The form of the past perfect is similar to present perfect tense. So perfect tenses tells us that we have to use this have or has with verb 3. And this past tense tells us that we have to change this have or has to verb 2. It means had. So in past perfect simple, we have to use had verb 3. For example, I had worked or I hadn't worked. So in the question and in the negative sentences, we still use the verb 3. We don't change the verb. The verb stays the same all the time, as you can see on the board. So we have some time markers that we use with past perfect tenses, and there are 4 of them: by the time, when, after, and before. So by the time is used with past simple, then we use the past perfect tense. Like, by the time alarm went off, I had already woken up and risen. So me waking up is happening before, then the alarm started ringing. So I say that by the time alarm went off, I had already woken up and risen. And we can use when with past perfect tense again. We use it with past simple and then the past perfect. Like, let's look at the example here. When we left for vacation, I had forgotten the plane tickets at home. So me forgetting the tickets is happening before, then we already on the road now, but I forgot it earlier. So we're talking about this. Or after. We use after with past perfect and then past simple. Like, after we had breakfast, we went out to do some shopping. See? First we have breakfast, then we go shopping. As you can see here in the sentence, after we had breakfast, we can use verbs like this. It can happen had, or the other verbs can happen like this. There's nothing wrong with this, okay? And about the before, with before we can use with past simple, then we use it with past perfect. For example, she'd been to Australia twice before we went together. So she went there, let's say that 2011, and we went together 2020. So I'm saying that she was there before, then we went there. So we can use it like this. Okay, so let's do some exercises about this past perfect simple. For example, we have this fill in the blank type of sentence. When I arrived at the stadium, the match. So it says when I arrived. So what we should use in this one? Yes, when I arrived, past simple, the match had started, past perfect. Let's look at another sentence, like we have this Susan, the radio after she, something. So we have this after. I told you that we use after with past perfect, but the sentence is a bit reversed, right? It doesn't matter. So let's look at the answer. Susan turned on the radio after she had washed the dishes. So first she washed the dishes and then she turned the radio. Okay, that was it for the grammar points of Unit 8. Let's look at now Unit 9. In the Unit 9 we have the grammar points of the passive and the articles. Okay, so passive. What do we know about passive is that we use this terms active voice and passive voice to talk about ways of organizing the content of a clause. The ways of organizing the content of a clause. So, for example, this sentence here. Cambridge University Press published this book. This is an active voice. But this book was published by Cambridge University Press. So this is a passive voice. You see that the objects and the subjects have changed. We are going to look at them to understand which one is the active voice, which one is the passive voice. So passive, the active voice is typically a word order. So we already know that in English language we always have to use the subject first, verb, and object. So the active voice is that one. The subject is the doer, the agent, the person who does the action. So, for example, in the sentence, Edward Barnes designed these houses in 1880s. So, Edward Barnes is the doer of this sentence. This is an active voice. But when we come to passive, the person or the thing that action was done to becomes the topic or theme. We can leave the doer, the subject, or we can place the doer in a prepositional phrase. Let's look at this one. For example, our active voice was Edward Barnes designed these houses in 1880s. But in the passive, what happens is that these houses were designed in 1880s. So it's a passive without an agent, without a subject, a doer. Or we can add it like this. These houses were designed in 1880s by Edward Barnes. So with this by, we can add the subject, the doer, if we want. So we use this passive when we want to change the focus of a clause. So, or if the doer is not important or not known, or we don't want to say it. So we can leave this doer and we can change our sentence into passive voice. So where do we use this passive? We use this passive voice mostly in academic and technical context. So when the process or the actions are more important than who or what did them. Like a sample was taken and injected into a tube. So it doesn't matter who did the action. We are only interested in the action, not the doer. Or in the study, children's eye movements were recorded while they listened to a series of messages. Again, the action is more important than the doer, so we can leave them out and we can turn these sentences into passives. And another usage is we often use passive forms of reporting words such as believe, think, say, consider, or find to create distance from personal statements and focus on more impersonal process. Like, police are looking for a man in his 30s. He is believed to be dangerous. I don't say that I believe that he is dangerous because it makes us a personal statement. But I'm saying that he is believed to be dangerous, saying that I am creating a distance with myself. Like in the other sentence, in some cultures, blowing your nose in public is considered impolite. I'm not saying that blowing your nose is impolite. I'm saying is considered. So I'm creating a distance between my personal statement and the other. So what is the forms of passive? Let's look at it. The most common passive structure is be plus verb ed or verb 3. So we have this active voice here. 5 million people watch the show. This is an active voice. How do we know that is active voice? Is that we have the subject here, we have the verb, we have the object, as you can see. But when it comes to the passive voice, passive sentence, the show is watched by 5 million people. You see that some of the objects and the verbs, objects and the subjects have changed. So let's analyze this, how we can turn this active voice into passive voice. So we have this example here, right? You see that the greens have changed, the reds are changed. So the first one, the object of the active voice becomes this subject of the passive voice. Then what we do is that the finite form watch of the verb is changed. So watch turns into is watched. And also the subject of this active voice becomes the object of the passive voice. That's how we turn the passive voice into that's how we turn active voice into a passive voice. So the forms of passive. The passive is not a tense in English, so each tense has its own passive voice, which is created by using a form of auxiliary verb to be and verb 3. So let's look at them, each one by one. So the first one is present simple tense. So be in present simple tense turns into am, is, or are. So we turn active voice into passive using am, is, are plus verb 3, like here. The coffee is made in Brazil, or the new insect kinds are found in South Africa. In the past simple tense, be becomes was and were. So what we do is that we use was and were with verb 3, like the story was reported in yesterday's paper, or the windows were cleaned by the cleaning lady. And in present perfect tense, be turns into been. But in the perfect tense, we have to use this have or has. So we have to use have or has been verb 3. See, they haven't been asked to the wedding, or he has been heard. So we have to use these have been or has been with verb 3. And in future simple tense, what we do is that we use will. So after will, we have to use the infinitive form, right? So we have to use be as be and verb 3. So for example, the horse will be taken to the stable after the race. Or will the contract be signed by the manager tomorrow? So you see that the passives can be positive sentences, negative sentences, or questions. Doesn't matter. We can make the sentence into positive or negative. So it's up to our opinion and our statement that we want to make. And in the models, after models, you know that we have to use the infinitive form, like here. So models, and then we use be with it, with verb 3. For example, reservations can be accepted up to 24 hours before arrival. Can be accepted. We don't change be. You always have to use be as be in the models. Or each section of the exam must be filled with F pencil. Again, must be filled. Be careful about those. Okay, let's make some exercises about this passive. For example, they make shoes in that factory. This is an active voice. How do we know that? We have this subject here, they, and we have the verb make and shoes object here. So when we want to turn this into a passive voice, what we do is that we turn the object into subject. So shoes are made in that factory. And how do we know that it is present simple passive? They make shoes in that factory. It's a general statement. There is nothing in the verb, so we know that it is present simple. Let's look at the another one. The police caught the criminals. So again, we have the subject, verb, and the object. So we are going to turn them. So the criminals were caught by the police. So why we use past simple passive is that our verb here is past simple tense, verb 2. So we have to use this were cause. Or let's look at this one. We have produced cars here since 1964. So here what we do is that, again, we have this subject-verb order, but our object is cars, right? And our sentence is have produced. So it tells us that it is present perfect symbol. So what we should do is that cars have been produced here since 1964. So be careful about this present perfect tense. You can use verb 3 and verb 3 again. There's nothing wrong with it. Okay, so the last grammar point of this unit 9 is the articles. The articles are a bit tricky situation when you're learning English, because you don't know where to use, when to use a or an, how to use the, and this one we're going to talk about that. So a, an, and the are articles. They are type of a determiner and they go before a noun. A noun, don't forget that. A noun or a noun clause. So let's start with this a or an. Ask when you're deciding on if to use a or an or the, ask yourself this question. Is the noun general thing? If the noun is general, use a or an. So a and an are indefinite articles and are used to indicate a single item, a single item. Do not use a and an with plural. A or an tells us that it is one thing only. For example, take a pencil. Take one pencil. Or I have an apple. I have one apple. So we use a and an with singular countable nouns. We cannot use a or an with the uncountable. Be very careful about it. For example, here. Could I have rice instead of potatoes with my fish? I don't say could I have a rice, because we know that rice is uncountable noun. So be very careful about this, countable or uncountable. We use a and an when we're talking about unspecific things, like that is something of many. For example, he likes to read a book. Any book, doesn't matter, we don't know the book. Or that was a funny story. Again, we don't know it. It's an unspecific thing. And we use a and an with someone's job. For example, I am a teacher. She is an engineer. So be careful about that. When you're talking about someone's job, you have to use a or an. Right. Here's the tricky one. We use a with the word following. It starts with a consonant sound, not letter, sound. Be careful about it. For example, a book. B is a consonant sound. Or a hospital. Ha is, again, consonant sound. Or a lake, consonant sound. But we use n when the word following starts with a vowel sound. Vowel means that a, e, I, or o, or u. Okay? An apple, an orange, or an opera. But we have an exception. Always we have an exception in English language, because language is something that is alive, so we always have exceptions here, like in this a or n. So words that begin with u or h can have either a vowel or a consonant sound. How you make the choice is that, please, when you don't know if you want to use, when you don't know if to use a or n, read it out loud, that word. So make the choice based on the sound of the first word after the article, even if that word is not the noun. So let's look at here. A union, or a uniform. Although that is U, starts with a vowel letter, I told you that this a and n based on the consonant sound. So we have to use a union, because union starts with U. U sound is consonant sound. But an unbelievable story, an umbrella. See, a sound. So we have to use n with it. So in the words with U, be careful. If the word starts with U, like you here, then use e. But if the word starts with a sound, umbrella, or unbelievable, then use n. The same with h sound. An honor. We don't say an. We do not say an honor. We say an honor. Or an hour. So they are vowel sounds. Be careful about it. Or a hotel. Now we say the hotel. Or a history book. So be very careful about it when you're making your choice about a or n. Please pronounce it before it. If the sound is vowel, use n. If the sound is consonant, use a. Okay, let's talk about the. The is, first of all, pronounced as the. Be careful about it. It's not the. It doesn't start with the sound. It starts with the. Your tongue should be behind your upper teeth. The sound. Be careful about it. So ask yourself this question. Is a noun specific? If it's specific, then use the. So we use the as a specific reference to a common noun or something that is one of a kind. For example, give me the book on the table. So we're talking about a specific book. Or the sun rose at 7 o'clock. It tells us that the sun is one thing, right? We don't have any other sun. So we can use the with it. Or we use a and n when we introduce something for the first time. And we use the after it. For example, I bought a sandwich. I shared the sandwich with my friend. So when we're talking about something for the first time, we should use a or an based on the word. Then we should use the after it when we're talking about it. And we use the with mountain ranges and some mountains. We use it with groups of islands. We use it with rivers, deserts, seas, geographical regions, motorways, and the names of some countries. So we have to use the with those. And we don't use articles with individual mountains or lakes when the name includes mount or lake. For example, Mount Fuji or Lake Victoria. We don't say the Lake Victoria, we just say Lake Victoria. Or we don't use articles with continents, countries, towns, or streets. Okay, that was it for your main course session. So your homework from Unit 8 is your Pearson book, page 141. And your homework for Unit 9 is your Pearson book again, page 142. Thank you for your cooperation, and I'll see you again.